Today on Histories Tech, we are looking at the most produced jet fighter in history with over 13,000 aircraft produced, the Mig-15. Mig-15 was a great leap forward in aircraft technology for the Soviet Union, as they were actually behind the Western powers. And it would be one of the first swept-wing fighter jets to actually break the sound barrier. But in order to understand the Mig-15, we got to look at its predecessor, the Mig-9. The Mig-9 was actually the Soviet Union's attempt to catch up with both the United States and Great Britain in the development of jet-powered aircraft towards the end of the Second World War. However, unlike the United States and Great Britain, which produced a domestically designed engine, the Soviets actually reverse-engineered the German BMW 003 engine. The 003 engine was used famously in the development of the Me-262, but was used purposefully for aircraft such as the Alvarado AR-234, the Junkers Ju-287, and the Heinkel HE-162. Because of this reverse-engineered jet engine, the Soviets suffered the exact same problems the Germans did with reliability issues on this engine. Additionally to the reliability issues of the engine, the aircraft could not fire while flying because the gas from the guns would actually extinguish the engine, and because it was a straight-winged aircraft, it had horrible control problems. Thus, the Soviets needed a replacement engine before they could even build a new aircraft. And that's where the Rolls-Royce Nene engine comes in. The Soviets needed a better, more reliable engine, as the Germans could never get over the issue of 2,500 pounds of thrust on their engines. However, the British had. So Soviet Aviation Minister Mikhail Khrushchev and A.S. Yakovlev suggested to Joseph Stalin that they buy the British-made Rolls-Royce Nene engine. At the time, the British Labour Party was actually wanting to improve relations after World War II between the United Kingdom and Russia, so this was seen as an opportunity. So a proposal was made from the Soviets to the United Kingdom. They agreed to a deal where they would purchase technical information and license this engine. Soviets immediately took this information and made their own copy of this, which became the Klimov KV-1 engine, which was the basis for both the Mig-15 and the Mig-17. Now that they had a reliable engine, it was time to build an aircraft. This new design incorporated multiple new features such as swept wings, a split forward air intake designed to push air around the pilot, and a series of aerodynamic trimmers called knives on the wings, designed to allow the plane to be adjusted due to manufacturing variances. With these design elements, the Mig-15 was ready to take off. The earliest versions of the MiG were not intended to be a fighter aircraft. Originally, the MiG was supposed to be a bomber interceptor, so it was designed not for air-to-air combat, but for taking down bombers that were incoming. This is why the first MiG-15s carried two 23mm cannons and one 37mm cannon. The idea was that these would intercept American B-29s and had the firepower to take down a B-29. However, when they were utilized in early warfare in air-to-air combat, they were not very effective. Later versions of the Mig-15 modified the position of the 23mm cannons to allow it to be an air-to-air dogfighter. With all of these improvements, the extremely rugged and reliable Mig-15 was finally able to be a combat-worthy aircraft. And the aircraft would see its first combat not with the Soviet Union, but with its allies, the Chinese, at the end of the Chinese Civil War. The main campaign of warfare over in the Chinese Civil War in the 1950s, they were limited to small engagements, and it was during one of these small engagements on April 28, 1950, that a P-38 was shot down by a Mig-15, issuing the first confirmed kill by a Mig-15. And this would be followed by a B-24 Liberator being shot down. But it would be during the Korean War that the Mig-15 would earn its reputation. At the start of the Korean War, the North Koreans were using Soviet surplus propeller-driven aircraft. However, after a request through China, North Korea received Mig-15s as well as training personnel. Initially, Mig-15s did not operate outside of areas beyond their limits of their base, and they had to work in pairs only. Their goal was to intercept formations of B-29s. Eventually, however, they were granted more freedom This would allow them to begin dogfighting with American aircraft. Now remember, at this time, American aircraft, they did have jet aircraft. However, many of them were still straight-winged and couldn't keep up with the maneuvering capabilities of the Mig-15. The state's response to this was to pull back on its piston-driven aircraft and rely on what jet aircraft it did have at the time until a replacement could be pushed out. That aircraft would become the F-86 Sabre. And this, of course, would lead to the very famous conflicts between the Mig-15 and the F-86 Sabre in the area known as Mig Alley, where we would see the world's first jet-to-jet air combat. Now, following the Korean War, the MiG-15 was in multiple conflicts involving the Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies, playing major roles in the Suez Canal crisis in 1956 and the Taiwan Straits crisis. Sadly, however, this extremely important jet would be relegated more towards a training role when its replacement, the MiG-17, rolled out. Currently, only one nation in the world operates working MiG-15s, and that's North Korea. So even with 13,000 produced by the Soviet Union and 4,000 plus licensed copies, only one nation currently has it in their inventory as an active aircraft. Now, because of the absolute massive number of these produced and license-built copies of these produced, there are more than 70 variants of this aircraft, including its license-built copied variants, making the MiG-15 probably the most varied aircraft ever built. And these are everything from small modifications, such as new engines or better firearms, to designing reconnaissance variants, to unusual aircraft like the Burlaki version, which was supposed to be a parasite fighter similar to the F-84 and the B-29, while other aircraft were actually converted into targeted drones and even cruise missiles. Due to the sheer number of these aircraft produced, they exist in museums all over the world and are actually a very popular aircraft for private collections, with 43 of them privately owned in the United States alone, making the MiG-15 one of the most popular jet fighter aircraft to own for private use. But there you have it, a look at the MiG-15, an aircraft that, while it was only in a few major conflicts, the fact that it was produced in such sheer numbers allowed for Warsaw Pact nations around the world to build up jet fighting aircraft, meaning that there was a need for the other side, the United States and its allies, to build counterjets, basically creating a race for the next jet aircraft. And even though it would be eventually replaced by the much superior MiG-17, its place in history cannot be forgotten, because it is the MiG-15 that created Mig Alley. It is the MiG-15 that forced the United States and the British to rapidly develop swept-wing jet aircraft. It is the MiG-15 that truly holds the name MiG when people imagine what a MiG looks like. But that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to talking to you on the next time.